Welcome, everybody. My name is Adri. This is my channel, Perpetual Pages, and I am so honored to be joined by debut author Melissa C., whose debut book, You, Me, and Our Heartstrings, is available now, I believe, in the US and UK, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm really excited for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And obviously, before we get started, I would love to give you a chance to sort of tell everybody what your book is all about.
You Me and Our Heartstrings is a YA contemporary romance that follows two disabled orchestra musicians. Daisy is a violinist with cerebral palsy, and Noah is a cello prodigy with generalized anxiety disorder. And the two of them get paired up to perform a duet for their school's annual winter holiday concert, and they fall in love in the process. But then their duet goes viral, turning their romance into one of inspiration porn, leaving Daisy and Noah to have to figure out how to change the narrative that surrounds their love story.
It's so good. I'm so excited to get a chance to talk to you about it. And to sort of get the ball rolling, I was thinking maybe you could tell us what was the initial inspiration for the story? Like, where did it begin for you?
So I was a violinist for many years, about 6 years, and I knew I wanted to write a YA contemporary romance about orchestra kids and about what that world is like. Because when you have a performance background, especially in orchestra, it's this different world where your world involves school, but it also involves string instruments and learning how to play them, and then also things like concerts. And in New York, we have what's called NISMA, which is this big school strings and music festival that is very terrifying, where you go and perform with your orchestra. And but I think it's before that you perform in front of a panel of judges completely alone. And I distinctly remember walking through this white hallway in my white blouse and black skirt and Mary Jane's, and my heart was in my chest, but also in my ears, but also in my throat. And it was just it like that level of just like it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Like, I wanted to have a YA contemporary romance that had that level of, here's all of this pressure built upon performance, built upon creative performance, and have it set in New York City, which is a metropolis of performance. And I knew ultimately what I wanted to do. And then it came to me when I was just really creatively and emotionally exhausted. And I was on the phone with my critique partner, Tia, and I told her, I'm like, I have this idea for this book. And she said, Melissa, you have to write this. You get off the phone with me and write this right now. I'm like, okay, I will. And then I started writing it, and realized about a page into it, when I was writing a Noah's perspective, his name was originally Hudson Wood, fun fact. And I was writing him, and then a page down, I realized he has an anxiety disorder. Wait, wait. And then it just kind of flowed from there.
I love what you said there about how you wanted to include orchestra or at least musicians specifically because it's like a completely different world on top of the
Yeah.
already academic layer of high school. And I completely agree. I was in both marching band and concert band myself, so I have some
Nice.
experience of being a musician in high school. Not to the same level where, like you said, that you were forced to perform on your own in front of the judges before performing as an orchestra. That seems really intense. We did not have to do that, thankfully, but I do recall the experience of, like, as a group going to these like very like uppity sort of contests and tournaments and things like that, and having to either sight read like these really ambitious pieces of music as part of the judging and then performing your own piece as well, obviously. So I think that's really cool that you got to sort of play with that in your story as well. Sort of as we were just talking about, Noah and Daisy are in the orchestra, and music obviously plays a really big role in the story. So like you said, you have your own musical background as a violinist. So how do you think music ties into the overall themes that the story is building towards?
There's a lot of music similes throughout the book, from how dry a bow is to how it can feel when you're playing too close to the bridge and things like that. Or if your heart is beating really fast, that's considered allegro because that means fast. And so music, in a way, kind of weaved itself in such a way where it's different from the fact that Daisy and Noah are musicians, but it also is a foundation for their relationship, and it is just a metaphor for their relationship. Because when you start learning an instrument, you're not afraid, but you're nervous about getting things wrong. And Daisy and Noah are nervous about working together and what that means, because so much hinges on being able to be successful in the winter holiday concert. And then as they start to play together and spend more time together, it gets easier and it flows easier. And there's just all of this pressure that is put upon the backs of high schoolers in general, and orchestra, anyone in performance. I also did theater. There's all this pressure on your back to be an incredible performer, whether you're in orchestra, whether you're in theater. And so to have music be a metaphor for Daisy and Noah's relationship in the beauty of how they found their love with each other, but also be a metaphor for the pressure that they are both under for various reasons, it kind of marries the two almost.
I like what you were saying about how music sort of lends a lot of metaphors as well to the tension of the relationship and even like the pace of the relationship as well. As we've sort of been touching on, there's obviously a romantic relationship between Daisy and Noah that's at the center of the story. So I'm curious about how you went about creating the tension that's between them, especially the romantic tension between them as the story goes on.
I knew I wanted to get to a point with Daisy and Noah's relationship where them just touching hands was this big momentous thing, mainly because I liked how my friends yelled at me for it. So it's my roommate who has Red Heartstrings in multiple iterations and rereads her copies because we have at least 20 of them in this apartment. She'll still yell at me for certain things. And I knew I wanted to have the tension there. They've touched hands, or Daisy's finger touched Noah's knuckle, or Noah's finger touched the back of her hand, and it's this big thing. And so you're not just playing music together, you're beginning to realize that you like each other, and what does that mean? So I wanted the tension that's in the music to kind of feed into the tension of their romantic relationship, where you have these heightened moments of just them not knowing what to do with their piece and then not knowing how to be around each other. But then as they play and get to know each other more, they realize that it's not just music. I genuinely enjoy spending time with you. I genuinely enjoy who I am around you. I genuinely enjoy opening up to you. What does that mean for us here? And then because they're 17-year-olds, everything is complicated. So I wanted to kind of especially feed into that. Audrey, you will know what I mean. The scene in the courtyard, that was a big thing. I wanted it to kind of be a break in the tension, but also just kind of ramp it up at the same time, where you know what's going on, but you also know that they don't know how to move past that particular point. And that in and of itself is also tied to music because it deals with the dance, which I didn't realize until now, but I did that.
Part of the tension probably comes from the fact that they're so different from each other, and they start the story being so at odds with each other, coming from such completely different perspectives as musicians, as to like even how they carry themselves, how they rehearse, the sort of things they value and that kind of stuff. So even when they do start rehearsing together, obviously that's a sort of tension because they're being forced to spend time together, so there's like forced proximity aspect of it, but then also like they don't know how to act around each other as well because they're so different. So I think that also adds to the tension. Something I also appreciate about the story is how Noah and Daisy are not only confronting external ableism, which you sort of touched on in the synopsis of course, but also internal ableism and even instances of ableism that arise in their own relationship. So how did you navigate between like the feel-good moments and the more difficult conversations that they had to have within their own relationship?
I knew ultimately that I wanted to write a romance. I wanted to write a love story. And for me, a romance, a requirement of that is an HEA. I knew I ultimately wanted to get Daisy and Noah to a place where they do live happily ever after, but I also knew that I wanted to speak about ableism from the perspective of someone who knows exactly what living in an ableist society is like, because I've been disabled since I was born. So obviously I understand how people look at me when they see my left hand, or if they slow down their speech, or if they start talking slowly to me, or if they call me the R word, like something like that. I wanted to bring that into a space with disabled teenagers because I wanted disabled teens to realize that you're worthy of a love story. And I didn't grow up with disabled teens and love stories, so I want to give that to teenagers now. And as for balancing the two of them, I knew I wanted to do that because I wanted to give a love story, but I also wanted to examine ableism from all sorts of different aspects, particularly in the vein of inspiration porn, because in the age of social media and the internet, inspiration porn is everywhere. It's everywhere and it's disgusting, and I wanted to tackle it, but I knew I ultimately wanted to give Daisy and Noah a soft place to land because that's who I am as a writer. I don't just throw my characters onto a bed of hot coals and say good luck. I pick them up and carry them where they're going to be comfortable. I knew intrinsically I wanted to have the balance of, here is this really wonderful love story, or at least I hope it's wonderful, and then here is this examination of ableism.
Yeah, and I think especially like with any marginalized community, people have to realize that like the call can be coming from inside the house, so to speak. You can experience homophobia from queer people. You can experience transphobia from trans people. You can experience ableism from disabled people. People within their own community can definitely be biased or even phobic towards people of the same experience as them or the same background as them. So I appreciate that the story is sort of tackling that as well. I think some people have a lot of ideas that if like a disabled person just like finds love, everything's gonna work itself out and like it won't matter that you're disabled anymore because you will have been loved, which is like the ultimate gift that somebody can bestow upon you. Very heavy quotes there, by the way. So I appreciate that the story doesn't go that route and says that even though these two characters are in love with each other or falling in love with each other, that doesn't mean that the love itself is going to protect them from these experiences of ableism because they're so built into the world around us. Speaking of rampant ableism, I also love how the true villain of the story, so to speak, is ableism itself. Oftentimes people demonize, weaponize, or even dismiss disability altogether without taking accountability for their own ableism. So how did you navigate making that distinction between ableism and not disability as the thing that has to be overcome in the story?
I knew from the very beginning that with Daisy, I wanted her to not accept ableism. I wanted her to immediately push back against anything ableist that she found. And her being disabled is just part of who she is. And that I knew from moment one. But as far as ableism being the villain, that is how it began also, where the initial idea anyway. And then I eventually wrote Bo, who I readily despise, but you're supposed to readily despise him. He very much is a perpetuator of ableism in such a way that, of course he is, because he doesn't see her as a musician. He sees her as a disabled charity case. And she isn't. She is this incredibly talented violinist who has more than earned her spot at the Academy, but he doesn't see it that way because he is just a disgusting depiction of what one form of ableism can look like. So I knew I wanted to have ableism be at the forefront in the way of Bo when I ultimately wrote him, because I don't think he even made an appearance until the second draft of this book. I knew that I wanted Bo to be the perpetuator of ableism, and I knew I wanted him to basically be the conduit through which ableism kind of flowed. If there was ever the notion of disability being something that had to be overcome, that was immediately squashed because Daisy, she knows her disability is something she has to overcome. Her disability is just what she lives with. And as far as Noah's disability of his generalized anxiety disorder, he eventually learns more about it because he's been hiding it for years. He doesn't know what to do, but ultimately he does learn what to do. He didn't overcome his anxiety disorder. He learned how to manage it. And there's a difference because you don't overcome your disabilities. You learn to manage and live with them. And that's perfectly okay.
To kind of switch gears a bit, there's a lot of really memorable supporting characters in the story as well, like Daisy's best friends, Amal and Mazar. And also Noah's extended family is also featured pretty heavily in the story as well. So why do you think it was important to feature all those different characters, and who was your favorite supporting character to write, if you can choose?
I wanted Daisy to have these wonderful best friends who are utterly besotted with each other and who are just super sweet and super supportive. All of them are weebs, so it's just this lovely little undercurrent of just these three weebs who are best friends, and then you bring in Noah who doesn't fully understand what friendship is, and because he hasn't had means of friendship, he's had means of just music and his cello and trying to best family expectations. And then he realizes, oh wait, friends, I have those now and they're good to have in my life, and I like having friends now. And Amal and Mazar are just these absolutely lovely people that I just love so much, and Daisy loves so much, and Noah loves so much. But I wanted them to have that friend group that always just supported each other. They needed friends who were involved in arts, but in such a way that they were there for them as friends first. All of them are in creative pursuits, but as far as what they all have together, it's friendship. And I knew that I wanted to have them have that. But as for my favorite supporting character to write, it's the same answer every single time. And that is Louis, Noah's dad. Louis Murray is my favorite parent I have ever written in my entire life. I love that man with every fiber of my being. Basically, just imagine King Fergus from Brave if he immigrated from Scotland, fell in love with a violist, married her, and then proceeded to have 3 musically talented sons, and is just this mountain of a man who is also besotted with his wife, utterly besotted, as if he were still 22. That's just how it is for them, because I wanted to write these two present parents in a YA novel. I didn't want them to disappear or be there to be some sort of like shroud of divorce or whatever else it would be. I wanted them to be completely in Noah's life, and I wanted them to be supportive and lovely and be there for their sons in such a way that you see that Noah's anxiety is what has him thinking of things that are just so bad. No, his family loves him unconditionally. Lewis loves him unconditionally. The talk that he and Noah have, where you learn more about the backstory between Lewis and Mackenzie, that was one of my favorite scenes in the entire book, because they're just talking, and it's just such a sweet moment where you're again reminded that Lewis is just an incredibly supportive father who just wants the best for his son, and that's why I love him so much. I love him for so many reasons, but Lewis is definitely my favorite.
As we were talking about before, Noah and Daisy obviously have their ups and downs with social media, especially after going viral online. But to put more of a fun twist on that sort of conversation, if you had to choose, which social media platforms do you think they would be and why?
Daisy would be TikTok, because she very much is outgoing, can be very excitable, and wants to just get out there and do these things. So excited to even work with Noah in the beginning, and she would absolutely 100% have a TikTok account where she posts violin covers of anime openings. That I know for a fact, absolutely. Noah, he would probably be Twitter, because he wouldn't have to post pictures. He would just have to like write out his thoughts a little bit. And I think and that I think would bring a comfort to him. So I think that he would like to he would be Twitter, I think.
I kind of love that Daisy would be TikTok, because she does seem more like spontaneous, and like you said, she does seem really enthusiastic about doing like contemporary violin covers, so I feel like that would be a really good space for her. On a related note, one of the conflicts that Noah and Daisy face very early on in their relationship is trying to decide which musical piece they want to perform for their duet, which is obviously a big choice. And they learn that they have very different musical tastes. Which musical pieces do you think each of them would like to cover the most? Like if they had a wish list of musical covers they'd like to do, which ones do you think they would be?
I'm going to mispronounce this, but Noah would probably cover The Swan by Camille Saint-Saëns, which is this beautiful classical piece. Daisy, she would probably cover History Maker, from Yuri on Ice. Either that or Yuri on Ice from Yuri on Ice. I think that either of those two, she would be very, very happy to cover, especially Yuri on Ice, because that's just such a gorgeous piece. I think she would have a lot of fun with that.
As you were talking there, I found myself thinking about how you came to the decision about how they would perform an original piece for their duet. Did you think about them doing other established pieces of music? Like, was it a copyright thing? Like, how did you settle on them doing an original piece?
Ultimately, what happened was I knew I needed to have them do an original piece, purely because I knew I needed to be able to describe it as I wanted to. I still don't really know what that piece ultimately sounds like. I would love to eventually at some point. I would absolutely love if like a violinist and a cellist like saw this and they were like, let's see if we can figure this out, because like I give you the first note that Daisy plays, so go from there. I knew I wanted to have them have an original piece because I wanted to be able to describe it how I wanted to, but also I wanted to sort of create something that was completely theirs, where they did this together, where it wasn't some pre-established piece from however many years ago. It was just this piece that was made for them, that they brought to life on stage at school, and what that means to them, because in a way their romance is a piece that they did on their own. So I wanted to kind of also have that reflected in the music they played.
I think that's a really good point. And then also, like you said, as a writer, it sort of frees you up and means you don't have to work within these sort of set constraints with a piece of music that everybody's familiar with, or some people are familiar with, or, you know, X amount of people are familiar with. So I think that's a really good point. And then, like you said, it being original is also kind of better for their relationship, because it means that there wasn't one of them who sort of won out in that debate between, I want to do a classical piece or I want to do a contemporary piece. It's not privileging either one of their preferences. It's just something that's made for both of them that's unique. So I appreciate that choice. To talk a little bit more about craft, when it comes to writing, everyone has their own process, of course. So what was the writing tip or trick that helped you the most as you wrote this story? And were there any golden rules of writing that you had to unlearn in the process?
I genuinely don't really have a process. I just write when I want to. I write when I have the energy. I write when I have the spoons. For Heartstrings, I knew ultimately I wanted to write a romance, and I wanted to just take my time. I wanted to ultimately be able to write the best story that I possibly could. So if I didn't write every day, I didn't write every day. It's okay to take your time, basically. And it was okay to take my time with this book. So that's what I did.
I love that. I love that you spoke to that, because I think that is a big, as I call it, a golden rule that gets passed around a lot, especially online and in the writing community, that like you have to write every single day if you want to be a quote unquote real writer. And I just feel like that's not the way that most people work, and that's not the way that most people's lives work. Writing whenever you have this space is really important, because each of those sessions eventually adds up and the book will be done when it is done. So I think that's important for people to hear. As a sort of fun question, was there any sort of media that you took inspiration from as you were writing Heartstrings? Were there other like music related or music centric stories that you felt drawn to or inspired by?
Heartstrings came to me because of one particular season of America's Got Talent with Cody Lee, who is a musician, an incredibly talented musician who is blind and autistic. And how they were marketing him was awful. They were saying how he was overcoming his disability, how he didn't let his disability hold him back, something like that, etc. And as someone with a performance background who is disabled, I was watching it and I'm just like, we don't exist to be inspirations to people. So I want to write a book that pushes back against it. I kind of took inspiration from other shows in a way, but not really, because America's Got Talent just made me like uncomfortable. So I think that's why.
America's Got Talent is notorious for their ableism. And even as you were speaking earlier, I was thinking of how so many times when you're watching auditions for any kind of reality show, especially any kind of talent show, and a disabled contestant comes on, it's just like, it turns to trash immediately. Something else I like to ask authors is, if readers read and enjoy your book, which other books do you think they should go to afterwards?
It's not YA romance, but it is YA historical horror fantasy. It is The Bonehouses by Emily Lloyd Jones, which is this utterly amazing book about this gravedigger and this map maker with chronic pain who go on a journey across a medieval fictional Wales to solve the mystery of these creatures called the Bonehouses. And Ellis's chronic pain is written with such love that as a disabled person reading that book, I had to put the book down multiple times, because I was just like, okay, I'm feeling so many emotions, and this is just so important to see. And especially in a horror fantasy, the characters just get to be badass because of course they do. And also there's a bonus of this undead goat that is a part of their adventuring party, who I love very much. Highly recommend that book. The prologue in particular is one of my favorite pieces of fiction I have ever read. It is YA contemporary romance, but it's a little bit sadder. Look up trigger warnings for both The Bonehouses and this book that I'm about to talk about, Full Flight by my friend Ashley Schumacher, which is about two kids in band who have to perform a duet. And that book had me weeping on a beach. I loved it. It's Ashley Schumacher, so you know she's going to make you cry. I loved that book so much. So if you enjoyed You and My Heartstrings, I think you would enjoy Full Flight by Ashley Schumacher and The Bonehouses by Emily Lloyd Jones.
I think those are both great recommendations, especially The Bonehouses. That's a great sort of backlist spotlight that I think a lot of people haven't heard about. And I do remember when that one came out, you were very, very excited about it. Good call to action for me as well. I definitely need to check that one out. To sort of wrap up as we're closing the conversation, can you give us a hint as to what other things you're working on, what readers can look forward to from you, and what's kind of coming down the pipeline in the next few years, hopefully?
So next up for me is Love Letters for Joy, which comes out in summer 2023. It is a queer, disabled, YA contemporary romance retelling of Cyrano de Bergerac, and it follows 17-year-old Joy Corvey, who is panromantic asexual, and she has cerebral palsy, and she wants to be the valedictorian of her elite New York City prep school, and she also wants to follow her dream of being a NICU nurse. The only problem is that, she realizes that maybe she's been missing out on a quintessential high school experience, which hasn't bothered her before because she's been pretty much very much involved in academia because she's been in academia her whole life, but particularly her senior year. And then she realizes that one of her best friends gets a girlfriend because of this anonymous love letter writer called Caldwell Cupid. And no one knows who they are. They're a complete shroud of mystery. She thinks, oh no, I have 6 months left until graduation. If I never find love in high school, will I ever find love at all? I know that like is hyperbole, but like when you're 17 years old, like that's the sort of thought process. So she decides to write to Caldwell Cupid and asks them, is there a formula for romance? And that in turn spawns a relationship between the two of them, but unbeknownst to Joy, she is actually writing to and falling in love with the very last person she ever would have expected.
Okay, exciting. I mean, that's enough. I'm ready.
Thank you.
For anyone who is now watching this and sort of interested in following you and your work, where can they find you on the internet? How can they support you, etc., etc.?
So on Twitter, I'm at Melissa C, and C is the verb, not the letter. It's just Melissa C. And then on Instagram, I'm Melissa C Writes over there. And then on TikTok, where I have been making a lot of D&D content, and it makes me very, very happy. I'm at Melissa C Books over there.
So all of those social media outlets and Melissa's website and all of that will, of course, be included down below as well. So definitely check those out. And if you haven't already read You, Me, and Her Heartstrings, I highly recommend that you do so. And like I said, it is available now. So you can buy that, borrow it from a friend, request it from your library, do what you got to do. But you should definitely read it. Thank you so much for joining me, Melissa. I really appreciate it. It's been so fantastic talking to you about this book. I'm so happy for you and for your debut and all your success and everything that is surely to come for you. Thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it. And to everyone watching, I hope you enjoyed. And we'll catch you next time. So bye, everyone.
Bye.